Thanks for coming. I'm Gavin Bowman from Retro Dreamer. We make apps, iOS games. We've been started since 2008, so we're coming up on 10 years, pretty much dead on. It was around about this time 10 years ago when we started working on our first game. It was just me and my partner Craig. He does all the art and I do all the code, and all the other business stuff we just share between us. Whoever wants to do it least usually ends up doing it. We've been around for 10 years now, and mostly being stubborn is really helpful. When the universe tells you to stop and you keep going, that's mostly because we love what we're doing, but also because we're a bit stubborn. And we've also managed to survive because we stay frugal when we're successful. It's easy to do it when you're failing, but when things are going well, sometimes you want to spend a little bit more money. You can't eat a Tesla. And having supportive partners too. Our wives have worked and been very good cheerleaders for us throughout the whole thing. A lot of encouragement, no guilting when things are going bad, and they've been more gung-ho about things a lot than us sometimes, so that's really helped. We couldn't really have done it without them. So flashback 10 years and we started working on Sneezies. We worked on about 3 months, and it was a fairly casual game, launched in December 2008. We learned a lot of things in those 3 months. At the beginning I didn't even have a Mac, I'd never used a Mac, we didn't have any iOS devices, so it was a whole kind of learning process. We had to go right from 0 to 100. But we didn't really learn anything about the market. When we launched, we had no featuring and no press coverage. We didn't really know we were supposed to do anything about that, I guess. We just uploaded it to the store and hoped for the best. But the people who did try it, we got good feedback from them. We got a sense that it could be something if people had tried it or who knew about it. So we kept pushing that, and we didn't give up on that one. And we researched and engaged the market and the community a lot better. We started reaching out to other developers on Twitter and via blog links. Everyone remembers blogs, right? Reaching out a lot to the iOS. There was actually an iOS games press around this time. People actually run websites where they reviewed iOS games, which doesn't really exist anymore except for 1 or 2. But back then it was quite healthy. So we reached out to them a lot. For some reason we thought we could sell t-shirts on our games, even though only like a handful of people actually knew what our games were. That's not really something you should think about unless you have like hundreds of millions of downloads. Bundle was funny. We got 5 other game developers, actually 5 game developers including us, and we put all of our games into a single app, and we put it in the App Store for a fixed price, and no one was interested because it was really silly. But I think maybe at the time we were thinking, because you could only have 148 apps on your phone at the time, and it was helpful to have 5 in one. But that was something that was just kind of a hangover from our old computer game days, where you used to buy compilation tapes and discs and stuff, and we thought we could apply it to iOS, and it didn't work. We actually made cakes. Now, this is something that actually worked, surprisingly. This is my Sneezies cake. I baked that just to kind of celebrate the launch, and I posted it on our website and on Twitter. And for some reason, that led to me running a bake-off for other indie developers. And we had lots of people making cakes based on their games. And I got a bunch of featuring on websites who were covering iOS at the time, and it helped us meet a lot of friends that way. I'm not sure how many direct sales we got as a result of the cake, but it was delicious, so it's fine. The little chart included there, I just dug that out because I was going through a lot of my old files, and it turned up. And this was when we launched a free light version. You can see our sales increased quite a lot. I'm not really suggesting that that's something you guys could do now with your apps, because obviously this is like 10 years ago and nobody does this anymore. But at the time there was a lot of people who said it was a waste of time. A lot of people did it, it didn't work for them. We did it did work for us. So you're always going to come across things that people are going to tell you won't work or don't work, and sometimes it's worth trying different ones. A few months later we made an Easter version of Sneezies. Mostly the reason why we would do something like this was because there was no in-app purchases back then, and we didn't really make games as a service in 2009. We just kind of made them and released them, and And that was that. So this was really the only way to add extra content in a way that might actually generate more revenue. People liked it because the bunny ears were cute. I think they look better than the other ones too. But it gave us another price point. We had a free version. We put our original game up to $2, and we had this one at 99 cents. So even when it wasn't actually Easter, we had like 3 different representations in the charts and the rankings and stuff. And I think it worked for us having the different range of options. As I look back, I take a look at what was working at the time, and it's pretty clear that we had something that was accessible and enjoyable to everyone. And it was relaxing and easy to play, and the artwork had really broad appeal. So naturally, at the time, our next game was Igor, which it was an arcade puzzle game, and it was really, really hard, and it wasn't relaxing in any way, and it was full of eyeballs. So you threw eyeballs at each other, not at each other, at other eyeballs, and they matched up, and that was. I have a lot I could say about Igor, because but that was a bad idea. After that, we made this little game to cheer ourselves up. It was a Christmas game. It took us about 2 to 4 weeks work, and it was our first experience with ads. Back in 2009, ad-supported games were actually a thing, much less of a thing than they are now, but we had a few friends who were using ads, and we thought it might be worth trying. It wasn't really worth trying with this game. I think it got a reasonable amount of downloads, but it didn't really generate much revenue. I think something like $80 in the month that it launched. But it was a fun experiment, and it's still my favorite icon of all of our icons. I love that one. So I couldn't really have the slides without including it. Then after that, I moved. I used to live in the UK, and Craig was in LA, and I moved. So being in the same place was a massive help. You can Slack and you can tweet and Skype all you want, but actually, like when you're doing creative work with another person, like being in the same room, feeding off each other is a huge help. And it also made it much easier to attend conferences. We went to our first 360 iDev, or I did, and we both went to our first GDC that year, and I'm so glad we did that at the time we did, which was pretty much as soon as we could afford it, because we met a lot of friends there that we're still in touch with today. And I'm preaching to the choir here because you guys are all here, so go to conferences. Around about the same time as we moved, we released this little game called Double Take. It was a little memory game, you just had to match, but it was a very matching game. We kind of overdid it with things like particle effects and game modes that were very arcade style, and the theme wasn't really suited to the audience that would generally play a matching game. It's kind of a running theme through these slides you'll probably see. Again, we tried ad supported, and we pivoted that one to paid pretty quickly, because a couple of bucks every few days is better than a few cents every week from ads. I've mentioned this one now because it comes up later. But around about this time, this is the beginning of 2010, we were mostly working on Sneezy's HD for iPad. We made it in time for launch. It was featured at launch on the iPad when the iPad launched, and we had the premium $5 price point. So now we had 4 different options for our games, and we were really happy with how it turned out. It was a lot of work for Craig, and a lot of kind of guesswork for the device, but it felt good when it came when we actually got a device and got to try it and see what it actually looked like on the real thing. And also first experience with being featured as well, and things are a lot easier when you are. We also got Sneezy's featured in the App Store around about the same time. We don't know why, but for some reason it was. Could just be a connection with the App Store, the iPad version launching, or something that we were doing to make noise, and they noticed us. So that had, and we were on device in the Apple Store, which was great. They were on iPads, and they was on iPhone 4s too, so we could actually like go into the Apple Store and like watch someone pick up an iPad and start a game, and then close it and play Plants vs Zombies for an hour instead. But it was really cool. And these little features, the Apple Store thing and the App Store thing, it really helped a lot with the long tail of the game. It spiked our revenue, and it took a lot longer for it to die off. And we should have done so much more. it's sometimes difficult to know what you're supposed to be doing at a particular time, but when you have something successful like that, we could have done extra versions, we could have done sequels, we could have done extra content, and we just didn't. We just weren't wired that way. So it did ultimately kind of die out, and that's kind of something that I have as a bit of a regret. After we finished it's worth saying as well, like when I look back at these slides, I remember being extremely frustrated that we were still working on Sneezies at this point. And then I realized that it's only 18 months, and I have no idea how to really connect that with how we feel about games today, because they're generally around for much longer, and it's just standard that you do a lot of updates. So it was just really weird how long that time felt to back then. Mostly at that point, after we finished that, we spent time making Linkoids. Linkoids was another hard arcade puzzle game, but this time we got better art and a better game. It was something that didn't really play like anything else at the time, and I think we did really well with it. And it actually got a pretty good feature at launch, but it didn't sell particularly well. I think the main reason probably was that the icon was pretty terrible. It didn't really tell you anything about the game, and it wasn't particularly compelling to like just an average user in the store. And then for some reason we replaced it with something that was exactly the same and didn't tell you anything about the game and didn't really look all that compelling to anyone in the store. So that was one factor, but another factor was that the gameplay wasn't really obvious because it wasn't really like anything else at the time. That can work against you if you try and be too creative and you don't do a particularly good job of selling what you've done. I think if we had app previews back then, this might actually benefit from app previews because you'd be able to see the game which looked much better in motion than it did in screenshots, and also it would be clear to people who actually did download it how they were supposed to play. And the theme wasn't ideal. I mean, being a puzzle game, you kind of have to hit that mom market, and the kind of casual target audience, and Space Aliens wasn't really the best thing to go with in retrospect.
That was my favorite game.
Thank you. And then nothing, just absolutely nothing for 8 months. We worked, we turned out, we were just burned out, and we tried many things. We put a lot of effort into various little games, and they just weren't working. They weren't feeling right. They didn't. Or maybe they did feel right, but we didn't have what it takes at the time to push on and finish it. And this happens, when you do creative games, especially if you're working on your own or just with a small team. If you're not getting the right energy, sometimes time just passes. And this was the longest that had happened to us at the time, but it's very rough when it does. But sometimes you come out of it, and we did, and we made Velocispider. This was 5 to 6 weeks work. And launched in the middle of 2011, and it was based on this sketch that Craig did one day. He actually did a pencil version. The pencil one he just scrolled on side it like part Velociraptor, part spider, all bastard, I think he said. It just looked like something that we could build a world around. We hadn't done anything. We hadn't really thought anything about it since he did the sketch, but we built a world around the character, and it felt really good, and it was very us, and it felt like this was like really talking to us. It got featured at launch, which was great, and it was probably our best game up to then. It was our first time making a small scope action game, and one thing we found as we did that was that action games are the way to go for us, really. That's where our sensibilities are in terms of what kind of games we like to make and what kind of games we like to play the most, and it seemed to be where we actually fit together as a team really well. And we did our first in-app purchase with Velocispider. Like, this was relatively new technology back then. I think we generated about a third of our revenue with the free version with the IOP to unlock the rest, so that was pretty cool. We still weren't very good at launch icons. The only thing I can think of when I look at this is that Craig and I must have decided that we had to have a border, and then when he tried to put a border on it, he just couldn't see past the border, and we just couldn't come up with anything that looked good. I'm just despair looking at that. The replacements were getting better though. I really like the replacement icon we came up with, and I think had we been featured at that, I think we would have done quite well with it, because it really sells the game and it's really nice rendering of the character. The project broke even. It wasn't a huge profit, but it it felt good. It was probably the first time since Sneezy's that we felt like we'd actually done something that was worthwhile. We didn't necessarily think that this was something we could repeat, because obviously we'd have to do a good game every 5 to 6 weeks, and that was hard going. So we didn't necessarily react to Velocity Spider right away in terms of changing our methodology. The next game we worked on was actually completely different, and it was called Duckers. It launched in mid-2012 after about a year of work, which was quite difficult. It was our first free-to-play game. That's totally free-to-play with in-app purchases for buying stuff. It got a really good feature at launch, I think, but mostly based on the art. I think it's still one of the best-looking games we've made. But the problem with it really was it took too long. A year was just too long for us, but also the game changed a lot during development. We originally set out to make a paid game because that was what we were doing, and it was kind of seeing where the market was going that kind of pivoted us to free to play, and so as a result what we had lacked a lot of depth. The gameplay in itself didn't have a good paid game goal, and the content for free to play wasn't sufficient to really pad it out, and we had no plan for post-launch content, which is just death to a free to play game. Craig actually had his first baby pretty much the day after we submitted the game to the App Store. That was quite an anxious night, so even though the game was doing quite well and we were getting good responses to it, there was nothing we could really do in terms of following it up. But luckily, while we were working on Duckers, something pretty good happened to us, and that was Android. Back in 2012, had I shown an Android slide back then, I would probably got booed. And that was kind of how a lot of developers felt about it. Actually, testing games on Android was kind of a big step for an iOS developer, because most people weren't doing it. Our first try was with Double Take. Remember the matching game from earlier? I toyed with a Palm port for that at one point, so I had an actual C++ version of it. So we could relatively easily put that on Android. All the rest of our games were mostly Objective-C, so those would all have taken quite a bit of time to port to Android. So the plan was we'll put Double Take on App Store, on the Google market. We'll see if all this device fragmentation issues that people are talking about are actually a big deal, and we'll see whether the NDK stuff that we've done for the C++ build actually works when it gets out there on a bunch of devices. And nobody downloaded it. Probably for the same reason that nobody downloaded it on iOS, but for some reason I didn't really think about that before I started making the port. I guess it was easy, but it was probably not the smartest game to choose. But we had a really funny idea. Well, we had an idea. We made Happy Poo. Happy Poo was a couple of days' work in early 2012. Me and Craig just walking down the street after work, ranting one day and saying, let's just make a game where you just polish a turd. And so we did, and there was basically this, and you rubbed it on the screen until it got shiny, and it went, oh, I'm shiny. And that was the whole game, and you just did it over and over again, and that was a big success for some reason. It was successful on Google Play, and we put it on Amazon, and I want to tell you it got to number 2. I really do, and I think it maybe did, but it may have been number 3, but number 2 sounds better. But it was huge on Amazon for some reason. I will never understand why. But we were still working on Duckers. And this, although Happy Poo was successful, it was just stupid and silly, and we just thought, we can't base our business on this. It's not making enough money to base our business on it, but it's nice to have, 500,000 downloads or whatever, or something that we just did in a couple of days. We didn't really see it as something that would last. But before we totally pivoted back to Duckers, we made this Happy Poo jump game. It was just a quick jumping game. It used the same graphics. It was more interactive, more enjoyable. But we thought maybe people just like the character, and we can just pivot on that. So we just put it in the store, left it, went back to finishing Duckers. Flash forward to 6 months, Duckers is finished, it's in the store, it's dying off already. And Happy Poo Jump is one of our top sources of revenue. I don't know how, we hadn't done anything with it, we hadn't promoted it in any way, but somehow it had taken off. So let's make more poop. we started working on Happy Poo Fall, which was kind of the same art, more ambitious game. It was like a Fall Down clone, but it was a bit more ambitious than Happy Poo Jump. We had objectives, we had different characters, poop characters, yeah, for real. And at some point I was showing some of my iOS developer friends the games, and they said, these are actually quite good, you should submit them to iOS, because there's way more money in iOS. So we did. I'll go this is 2012, so Patrick Stewart voicing poop emojis is still like 6 years out, so we're kind of on our own. Apple thought it was kind of disgusting, but fortunately I'd used iOS for development, so because I didn't really want to have to work with Eclipse or Android phones, so I just made the game on iOS, C++, and then ported it to Android at the end when I actually had to do the releases. So it was a relatively easy port, and not much was lost. And we got ready to move on, and then we had a thought, which was that ice cream was better than poop. So we changed the graphics a little bit, and we submitted Ice Cream Jump to the iOS store, and that was fine. Everyone loved that, and that took off too. Actually took off more than the poop. So, ice cream is actually better than poop, but we still kind of got associated with the poop for like a long time afterwards. And having multiple games didn't really seem to hurt, so we were then able to take Ice Cream Jump and put that on Google Play, and that did better than the poop game on Google Play too. And we took the poop game eventually and we changed the name to Pudding, and we put that on iOS, and that was fine there too. So we had both games in both markets, and it was doing great. And it was like immediately obvious that this was a thing. If you remember with Sneezy, I said we kind of felt like it could be a thing if people saw it. With like 5 years kind of experience, it was obvious that this was a thing. It was just getting downloads. We weren't doing anything. They just kept exploding and going up, which was kind of unheard of. So we, being a little bit more mature and a little bit less kind of impetuous, we decided to take it a little bit more seriously, and we did content updates. So you see the screenshot over here is the first screenshot we had in the App Store. They were pretty much all like that. It was so plain, I don't know how anyone downloaded it. But through the years, we added hats, characters, themes, and they all helped. It kept the game running, it kept people happy. But being us, we still put most of our effort into making new games, because that's just how we're wired. This was Happy Poo's Revenge. There was something freeing about Happy Poo. I don't know exactly why, but I think it gave us the freedom to just pretty much try any kind of game, and then if people didn't like it, well, it's a poop game, no one cares. And if they did, we knew we could do something else with it afterwards. So it was kind of like a good way to experiment with game ideas and have fun while we were doing it. I mean, that's like a pirate cat with an eye patch jumping on people in a paper cup. It's pirate poop, sorry. Cat poop, sorry. So it was fun. I mean, we had a lot of fun doing that stuff. We also made the Sneezy's match game, and that was not successful. And that was very reality check for us, because we always kind of felt like Sneezy's was in our back pockets. We felt like, when things get rough, we'll just make a Sneezy's sequel or another Sneezy's game, or we'll do something with that, because that was quite popular. And then when nobody cared, we were kind of like, oh shit, we don't actually have that in our back pocket anymore. We better make some new stuff. So that was kind of an eye-opening moment. We also, during the same window, we made this game called Slambots, which is actually one of our favorite games. Eagle-eyed people among you will probably notice that the gameplay was actually kind of similar to Happy Poo's Revenge. We took what was popular out of that game and we turned it into a real game, and we added a lot of extra stuff, and we made it more action oriented and better graphics and stuff, and turned it into one of our best games, I think. It was actually also our first feature in a while, which felt really good too, because we kind of thought we might be out in the cold a little bit after all the poop stuff, which Apple conveniently ignored. But it was a massive flop. I mean, if you told me in 2013 that a game could be featured on the front page of the App Store and sell this few copies, I would never have believed you. But actually, like looking back at everything as I prepared the talk, I think had we taken this game and given it the extra time to actually become a good game, I think we could actually have made a really good game, at which point it probably wouldn't have been a flop. I think there's like kind of like a threshold where you can make something that's good and it can do really badly, but like there's like a small kind of like there's like a level where you can push it to where it actually starts to do well. With games, it's kind of a subjective thing. If it's not quite there, it's still not there. And I think that was probably like something that we could have really explored with that, but we didn't at the time because we just took the signal from the market that this was a flop and we just moved on. And we made Cat Basket. The Cat Basket was terrible. This was a game where Craig and I said one day, wouldn't it be funny if you were a cat lady standing on top of a big giant cat trying to catch other cats in a basket? And we laughed and we said, yeah, that'd be funny. And it was for like a week. And then for like the 3 months we finished in that game, it wasn't funny anymore. And we just, it turned out badly. We didn't nail the game mechanic. We didn't really nail the art, I don't think. And it really brought to light how frustrated we were creatively with what we were doing on the mobile in mobile. The games that we were making that we thought were really good, like Slambots, even Linkoids to an extent, but especially Slambots, they were just dying completely. They weren't interesting. They weren't making any money. And the games that we were trying to make for the market, kind of like Cat Basket, were very hit and miss. Could we still make something like Sneezy's or Ice Cream Jump that would be successful, or were we kind of stuck? And did we really want to try and find out? Did we want to make a bunch more kind of like lottery ticket type games and see which ones stuck? And we weren't sure, but we decided to branch out. Craig would make a PC game with a new developer we brought on. This was quite a big investment for us, but we thought it was worth trying. And there was Monsters and Monocles he would work on, and I would maintain the mobile library so that we could be supported by financially while this happened. And when we got to the end and the game was done and the mobile library was hopefully still around for us, we could figure out what was next. We could either recompile as a team or we could move on to something else. And for the first year it seemed to work. I made a Flappy game that was okay. Did okay. I was actually called Happy Poo Flap. Yeah. I made this annoying Meow Tile game, which reused some of the Cat Basket art. And if you've played the piano tiles games, they're kind of a standard thing, but I always made really annoying meow sounds every time you press the tile, because I don't know why. I guess I liked annoying people when I was making these games. I don't know. For some reason it was really popular in Chile. We got like maybe like 750,000 downloads in Chile or something silly like that, which I didn't even know there was that many Android phones there. But it was okay. I mean, I was having fun. I was still having fun. I made Happy Burger, and that did okay, but I wasn't really happy with the game. But sometimes it comes to a point where you either have to throw something away or you have to call it done and kind of get it out there and move on. And I did a lot of updates to our popular games, extra hats and stuff for Ice Cream Jump, just kind of keeping that ticking along. Monsters and Monocles was coming along great. The guys who were working on it, everyone seemed pretty happy. The business was, the whole strategy seemed to be working. And then everything went wrong. This is kind of tricky to talk about, but around about this time we got contacted by the FTC about some of our games. I'll rewind a little bit. In the mid-2013, they changed the children's data protection laws, mostly to protect kids from having their photos and audio recordings protected. And we weren't actually collecting any data, but there was a little bit in there that was about advertising. And with advertising, you had to update your SDKs and make sure that they were only showing random ads and not relevant ads based on the user's device identifier. If you had an app that was targeted at children, and they felt like ours were, and this was not a short process. This was like a really rough time. We had a lawyer. Fortunately, I could afford a lawyer, and he was like my best friend for the whole time. We were talking on the phone for hours. And he never hung up. It was great. I don't know why. This pretty much killed any ability I had like to function as a human being. We ended up paying a $300,000 settlement on top of our legal fees, not a whole lot of anything really happened in that time. I felt pretty much physically sick the entire time, which was quite a long time. And we were kind of like stuck. When we had to go through it, there was nothing we could do. This was just a thing that happened to us. So this was me. I didn't make a lot of games during that window. I didn't do a lot of updates on our existing games. It was hard to work on it when we were talking to the lawyers about problems with it. When you have a big company who goes through something like this, the legal department handles it, and the creatives still go to work and do their creative work and stuff. When you're actually one of the creatives and you're actually like the person taking care of everything, it pretty much killed the whole business, because we were kind of at a sensitive point in the long tail for the games that we made in 2012. Those were kind of at a point where we really needed to be updating them and driving them forward and following them up with like our next generation of games, all with really good content. Because that wasn't happening, when the thing was over, we didn't really have any user base left, so that kind of sucked. We didn't really have anything to go home to. I tried to shield the other guys as much as possible from what was going on, because I didn't really want the whole company to stop. So that was good for them in a way, but it was really bad for me. I had to call Craig every now and then and tell him what was going on, because obviously everything affected him too. But he was able to kind of spend significant chunks of time where he was still feeling happy and okay and doing stuff. I really didn't. We have this thing now when we want to have a chat. We'll send a message saying, "Hey, you're free to chat," and then the next message is always, "It's nothing bad," which is kind of a leftover from this time when generally, if we needed to talk, it was not something good. Also, I had kids during this window, which kind of is efficient timing in a way, because they really take away a lot of your ability to work. So when I was like physically and emotionally like really not able to work at all, it was probably a good time to like load up with little people who would not really allow me to work. So there's a silver lining there, I think. Somehow it didn't feel very good at the time, but it was probably good timing. And it's been difficult moving past it. I made a few games along the way that I was quite happy with. This was called Space Ball, and this was Electro Ball. For some reason, all my games were about balls. I can't imagine why. But I found that after the whole thing, I had a lot of trouble with finishing and launching things. I had like a really toxic association with the actual act of putting things in the store and making products and actually putting them out there for people to use. You read a lot of indie developers will talk about how finishing is actually like a really important skill, something you should work on. It's 100% true, and we were really good at it to begin with. But when you get triggered by it, it's kind of an important part of your job, it's really not good. Even just putting these slides together kind of like cranked my stomach really hard. But it's time heals, and in 2017, I made this game, Zombie 3 Throw. It was pretty fun. You had to you were a zombie, you had to tear off your head and throw it into the basket. And this was really cathartic for me. It really fit how I was feeling, and just was really good. I think I could have done more with the game mechanic at the time, but I wasn't really in the right place. But it got a little feature, and that actually, I can't really overstate how important that was to me. It was only a small feature just in some European countries, I think, but it really kind of made me think, hey, I can still do this, and this is you're still kind of, you can still make it here, you can still do the same things, and you don't have to totally give up. And it gave me a lot of hope, and it made me feel pretty good. Unfortunately, I haven't released anything since. That's quite a long time. Things are still kind of slow. I'm still kind of working on getting better all the time. So I don't have a whole lot to show for the last 4 years. But I did do about 90 updates and launches to our existing games during that time, which is actually quite a lot of work still. Things like 64-bit updates, old games that broke, broken ad networks, broken IAPs, various things I had to do. We did a bunch of Apple TV games at one point. But I kept everything running. I really was priding myself on having still all of our apps in the store, and I was kind of, okay, this is a thing. I'm still here. I'm still doing it. Everything's still going. And then this year I just decided I was done, and I started shutting everything down. I took out all the ads. I didn't want to be associated with that stuff anymore, since it's kind of, I probably should have done it earlier because it has such a negative association for me. I kind of felt like I had to keep it going, and this year I just decided that was enough. So I started switching to a fixed price model, or free games, or paid games, or something like that. Something where we can just make money and enjoy making games without having to deal with that. And I came down to about 20 iOS apps and 9 Google Play apps, which is down from way over 100 at some point when we had the Nook Store, the Amazon Store, the Google Store. We've thinned everything down a whole lot. It's way more manageable now. Yet when technology changes, I could feasibly update all of our games to the next version of iOS without dying. when we had 100 and whatever apps, it was a lot of work. Anytime anything needed to change, and a lot of our existing games are now just free because we didn't really take the time to put in-app purchases or anything in them. We just kind of shut down all the ads and put everything into kind of a legacy mode. They're really just there just for the people who enjoy them, and hopefully to sit there alongside whatever new stuff we do. So hopefully this is me now or soon. It might be hard to survive in mobile, trying to make money this way, because obviously ads make up a huge part of the industry. But with you have the existing laws, you have the new laws like GDPR and stuff, driving a whole bunch of regulation, and I think it's heading definitely in a way where it's not going to get any easier for people to run things like that inside their apps in the short term. This really helps me sleep better and get healthy again, and get a positive attitude towards what I'm doing. Which is good. It's exciting. I feel good about trying again, trying to make games again, trying to find my way back to where we were pretty much 2012 when we made The Lost Spider, 2011 when we made The Lost Spider and we were really happy about it, or 2013 when we made Slambots. And I think that our best games are still ahead of us, and that's a really good thing for me to be feeling that way. And Monsters and Monocles still, the guys were still able to work on it while we were going through all this stuff. So it's on Steam now. It's still in early access, but it'll be finished sometime soon. It's taken a lot longer than intended because it was difficult for Craig as well. But it's coming along well. I think in the medium term I'll be working on that game too. And that brings me to today giving this talk to you guys. I actually, when the talk was accepted, I thought, okay, I'll finish one of these games I've been working on, and I'll get it in the App Store, and I'll have a really positive ending. And I didn't get around to it, so I just have to settle for optimism, I'm afraid. But that's better than where I would have been if I'd done the talk a year ago, or 2 years ago especially. So yeah, that's it. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to take them. And if you want to come up to me later and ask questions, I'm going to be around tonight, so feel free.
You mentioned how you thought that you would give the Slambots a little bit more. Have you thought about going back to revisit some of those games?
Yeah, we have. I think we have a lot on our plate with finishing Monsters and Monocles. But yeah, I have a little fondness for Slambots. I think it may be a big job to bring it up to date now, because obviously 5 years has passed. But I feel like as a PC game or a console game, with the right changes, could probably still be pretty good. Yeah.
I'm curious, for your games, do you play on SmartKit and Swift, or?
No. Because we still kind of have Android as a possible option for us, and obviously as we move forward, we want to be able to make games that we can put on PCs and consoles and stuff as well. Fixed platform stuff is kind of difficult to spend a lot of time in when you're going to invest time in something. Sorry?
Do you use Unity?
Unity, we do use a little. Monsters and Monitors is written in Unity, and that zombie basketball game I did was Unity, and one or two others along the way. Most of our games that are still in the store are still Objective-C native with some C++ stuff and OpenGL, because that's just how we started 10 years ago. And but obviously going forward for cross-platform, Unity makes a lot of sense. Unity or Unreal Engine.
You, Craig, had a ton of different games, a ton of different game mechanics, and a ton of different themes. How do you come up with these ideas, and then how do you pick one to invest in the next, like, it's working on?
Well, I think the talk kind of showed that we don't do a very good job of that, really. It was just, we're just two people. Whatever is we're most interested in collectively, that's what we work on. And once we start, we tend to finish something, which in something like some cases is good. Like with Slambots was kind of like, and then Linkoids were kind of like, we may have been tempted to give up after we started on those. And some things we should give up on, like Cat Basket was really terrible, and we should never have made that game after the initial kind of humor side went away. So yeah, we just work it out between ourselves. Any more questions? Yeah.
Omar, you mentioned a few times in which you had gotten a feature upon launch.
Yeah.
So presumably working with Apple to get all the assets and stuff ready.
Back then, I think Dockers, maybe when Dockers, I'd gone to a tech talk shortly before, and I think I had a contact at Apple at the time who I sent it to. So I think they knew it was coming with Dockers. I think most of the other ones were just surprises, happy surprises when we just launched the game, and I guess they liked it and they decided to feature it.
Were most of your features at launch, or did some of them come like after?
Sneezy's was the only game that we got featured after launch. All the other that we did get featured, they were all featured at launch when they had the worst icons. Yeah.
So would you say you built the games that you wanted to play?
Right. Pretty much. Yeah.
Those didn't do as well, or they did better?
They didn't do well, mostly. Like the games that we thought were really good for what we wanted to make, when we just let ourselves run like creatively free, they tended to fail. And the stuff that we made kind of either like casually, like on the side for fun, tended to either be successful or really unsuccessful. And I think we kind of felt like, this is not a sustainable approach. It's like we can try and make games that are going to be successful, and we'll make like a bunch of bad ones and maybe we'll get a good one in the middle. Or we can try and make games that we think are really good and that we're really happy with, but they don't seem to be working out, and that's why we kind of decided we had to try a different platform. Our gaming history is all controllers, like I think for Craig especially, it was really satisfying to start working on a game for a PC with a controller. It gave him a different kind of tactile sense than a touchscreen game. Because I always tried to make games for the touchscreen that were very specifically for the touchscreen, and didn't really I didn't really just slap buttons on the screen and try and play it, because I never really liked doing that myself. I never really liked on-screen touch controls, so I always tried to make stuff that was much more tailored for the touch device. But sometimes I did it well, sometimes not so well. Anyone else, or am I Tom?
So how long did you know Craig before you guys started? Did that help the business, do you think?
No, I don't think that really helped. I mean, I'd known Craig about a year or two before. Longer. No, I had known Craig longer. We were, Craig's married to my wife's sister. So we met that way. I guess we've known each other for 15 years now. Yeah, so like 5 years before that, and I guess we just talked along the way about games a lot, and eventually decided it'd be a good thing to do. Cool. I will, thank you. Thanks everyone.